Hello everyone, and now that we've installed Unity, let's go ahead and just kick the tires a little bit. So what I'm going to do is bring Unity up. If you haven't, go ahead and do that now, and you should get something like this. We are going to go over to the New button, so let's go click that. And I always just give it some names. If you notice from my last screen, I call them temp and stuff like this. This is going to be maybe test. Just so that I can get rid of them easily next time I go into this folder. I have a folder picked out. I would suggest that you have you can go with the default and not worry about it, but I would suggest that you create your own Unity folder. Just to separate them out from everything else, and then it's easier to find them later. This is sticky, so you won't have to type that in each time. And I'm going to go ahead with the 3D template. We're going to do both 2D and 3D, probably focus a little more on 2D this go around. But let's do 3D first, just so we get a full view of what's going on in Unity. So I'm going to create project, and it will install some packages on the way. Yours might take longer than mine, mostly because I've hit the pause button a couple times to save you from this. But it's always got to do a couple setup things. Some are done every file, and they're just adding consistent passages. Some are just initial setup, and or specific to the file you've already created. And here we go. So I'm getting blank, and it's going to pop everything into existence. It gives you a real life look right about here. We have basically an endless space at this point we're going to be able to create inside there. So you can see there is a game, scene, and asset store. Let's just worry about the scene and the asset store. So this is kind of neat because it shows you what is actually being gridded out and how things exist in three-dimensional space. As you can see, Y over here is up, and then X and Z create the if you want to say, the earth layer or the flat bottom here that we're going to start with. You can go below it and above it, but it has essentially a 0, 0, X0 to Z0 creates this plane that gives you that surface. Game is what it's going to look like more inside the game. So let's go ahead and create something just real simple. So go ahead and click on this, and we're going to do actually, you know what? Let's do a terrain first. That's not simple. I'm backing this up. Well, but for our intents and purposes, it's just going to remain flat. In the future, we're going to mess with this a lot more. And so, as you can see, you get this triangle here. But remember, this is in 3D. So we're going to want to look at this triangle in real life. See, it's right here. That's not so good, huh? It's essentially a flat plane that's taking up some space. So in the scene, the way to get to look at it better is you're going to have to control it with your mouse. And it behaves very similarly to a lot of 3D products like 3ds Max and Maya and stuff like that. So if I click the middle mouse button and hold it down, it's going to kind of drag it. And notice I'm kind of going down to the point where I can go through it. That's kind of okay. But I'm going to use the middle mouse button again, and now I'm going to roll it towards me to kind of zoom out a little bit. I can use the right middle mouse button to turn left or to turn right, so we can see more of it. If I want, I can do something like this. I tend to, since this is probably the 0, 0 spot, I want to keep that in play. So I'm just going to rotate it back there. As you can see, you can rotate it up and down too a little bit. So that's kind of nice. And should we start with that? Okay, let's go ahead back into the game. It still looks funky in the game, right? And that's because of our main camera. So inside the scene, there's a main camera. See it right here on the left. And these are all the parts of our scene. We have a light, we have a camera, and we have that created terrain. Let's go ahead and double click on the main camera. That shows us where our camera is, and that thing in the bottom right is what was on our game view there. So what I'd like to do here is get that into a little bit more of a good look. So, and maybe even to the point where it's looking at what we're looking at. So let's go ahead and drag it. You can just click on these arrowheads and that will pull it forward. So if I bring it up here and bring it down here and I zoom out, I'm using my middle mouse button scrolling, that's going to give me roughly where I've been, right? But the problem is I'm still a little bit too close to the surface itself. I don't have this nice up in the air view. So see how Y is a specific color? Since I'm colorblind, I'm going to say that's green or yellow, depending on what it is. That's going to correspond to the color, same color here. So I'm going to pull this up, and now all of a sudden you can see that green and yellow. Let's turn. If you want to rotate, there is a little rotate tool right here. And these are really, in this case, we're rotating an object. So the main camera is really an object, not a viewport. And we're going to show what we look at here. Now, as you can see, we might have actually gone too high because the tip is down and barely showing. So maybe we can move it back down by hitting the directionals and going back down. And now you can see it a little bit more. We can also tilt the camera a little bit. So just like we rotated our view with our middle mouse button and our right mouse button, we can grab this by grabbing any one of these curvy lines here. So the curvy red line is going to rotate it, since it's red, it's going to rotate it about the x-axis. And I'm going to rotate it down, which makes it feel almost more like Y. And then there's a green one, which is going to make it allow me to rotate around the Y-axis. And it's getting a little wonky, so let's straighten it out just a little bit. And I think I like that. I think I'll move it down. Oops, excuse me, I hit the wrong button. Let's go there. Let's move it down just a little bit. So now it's roughly looking at what we're looking at. Okay, now let's go ahead, and what you should see in the game view is like this. Now, is this the actual game view? No. To get the true game view, or what your players are going to see, is this play button. So when I click the play button, boom, look at that. A little underwhelming, I understand. But that's because nothing's moving. We don't have a train. It's just a white rectangle in a gray space. We're eventually going to add things to that. So it's nice, though, that we know that the game angle or the game view is the same as the play, though, right at this point. That's kind of nice. When it comes to other things like complex particle effects and stuff, they just can't really show them really well in the game view without really slowing you down in creating these things. Okay, so let's go ahead and put another object in there. And this time I'm going to do a 3D object, and we'll do I like capsules. Now, it created it. You can see it created it, but we have no idea what created it. So let's double click on it. What I want you to do now is get out of the services and go to the inspector instead, because this will give you specific information about our capsule and hopefully help us to find it. So right now it tells us the X, Y, and Z. I can actually change this. Since we know Y is up, we can just change that from, I have a -6 to, let's say, a +10. And that should raise it. There is our terrain, there is our camera, there is our directional light, which, as you can see, goes from top left to bottom right, and our capsule. Let's double click on it. There you go. So it's way out there. And by way out there, it was beyond our scope. So let's go ahead and remember what we had here. We had, it's a negative and negative, very little negative in the x, a little bit more negative in the z. So let's go ahead and change those numbers to positive numbers. Because if you look, x is going to be positive in this direction, z is going to be positive in this direction. So if we make them both positive, it's going to push it this direction. And I'm going to say, let's go 10 again. And let's go 10 again. And now you can see that it's in there a little bit more. It's a little bit up in the air, so I'm going to pull it in even further with the x and the z's. And now when we go into the game, what I want to do is get back to the camera view. So make sure that it's in the camera. And as you can see, the camera was actually beyond it. So let's go find it again. And let's go ahead and move it back to where we know the camera can see it. So if we were to click on our camera, hopefully we're getting it into a good sight. And see, okay, now when I take the capsule and move it down, see what happens there? It goes from a color to like an anti-color. That is because it's going below the surface. So what we want to do is just barely get it above the surface, and that is going to allow us to see it. Now in the future, we'll do a little bit more to this to make it a little easier to find things and move things. But for this purpose, let's do that. And now all of a sudden you can see the capsule. We have that nice lighting, which gives us a nice little shadow. However, it's still white on white with a little bit of gray shadowing, right? So we'll improve upon that, but let's come back to that next time.